Okay, I wanted to show you how to create a pattern kind of like the one I created in Time to Get Off the Couch here. This one I made by using the rotate tool in Illustrator, and I'm going to show you how to make something just kind of similar. I opened just a new blank sheet of paper for a file here, and I'm just choosing the line segment tool. I'm holding the shift key down as I drag my line segment so that I get a nice vertical line, and I'm going to give that a stroke. Let's give it an 8-point stroke, and instead of a uniform stroke, I'm going to give it this width profile stroke so that it has a little bit of a fat end and a little bit of a skinny end. Then to use the rotate tool to create a pattern kind of like this out of that one stroke, we're going to go to actually you'd normally see the reflect tool on top. So go to the reflect tool and look underneath for the rotate tool. When you rotate something normally, it will rotate around whatever point has been set, usually right in the center as the rotation point. I don't want that point. I want it to rotate around the skinny end here. In fact, I could even have it rotate around nothingness down here. So I'm going to option click because I'm on a Mac, or you could alt click if you're on a Windows computer, and I'm going to drag, let's expand this a little so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to drag that rotation point down so it's actually off the line and about to there, let's say. And when I do that, when I let go, I get a chance to type in the angle of rotation I want, and I don't know what I really want. I'm just going to try 10 degrees and see what happens. And now what I can do is, instead of just rotating this critter all by itself, I can rotate a copy of it like that so that I get two of them. And now the really cool thing is that on a Mac it's Command D. I think it might be Control D on a Windows, but I can just keep hitting that same thing over and over again. And I wanted a kind of an empty area in here because that's what worked out well for me on the Time to Get Off the Couch design. She had exactly 36 of these, I guess. Getting a cramp in my hand here. And really fun way to get a pattern very easily. In Time to Get Off the Couch, I squished this down into a shape that worked better for my 3.5 by 8 inch rectangle. You could leave this as is, or you could combine all these critters into one group and distort them together. I'm going to Command minus this so we can see it a little more easily. And of course, then the other thing that you can do is to use the box itself as a clipping mask. So I'm going to just steal one of these boxes here. I'm going to grab it with my black selection tool and go Edit, Copy. And then I'm going to go over here and go click in my file and go Edit, Paste in Front, because obviously we want to use the box as a clipping mask. So we're gonna want it to be the top object. And just as you always do when you have a clipping mask, you're gonna select everything all together. I just dragged a selection marquee around everything, and you're gonna go Object, Clipping Mask, Make, and you will have your design in your box. And of course, if you wanted to drag out this design to fill up the box, or if you wanted to make it bigger to start with, if you wanted to repeat several versions of it within your box, this is a very cool way to get things to begin to connect. So that when you, let me copy some of these words here. So I'll copy time and paste it into my design here. And now you can see that the word time is connected to everything. And if I were to put a stroke on the box, and you can see that now all of my letters are attached to the edge of the box. There's obviously some big shapes here, which I would want to maybe drag this out to fill, or put something else in there, some other words or something that would fill it. I chose to give my box quite a thick, I'm going to open the stroke window to do this, quite a thick stroke as a sort of frame, you don't necessarily need to do that. We're confining you to this 3.5 by 8-inch format because of the not so much the expense in plastic, but the expense in time that it takes to print these things at this stage of their development. So there's no real need for you to use the rectangular edge if you have some other edge in your design that you like the edge of your letters or something. But I'm going to restore the stroke here with my white selection tool to that 3.5 by 8-inch rectangle, because in my own design I chose to use a sort of a framing element there, and I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to do. So to do that, of course, I'm just simply going to use my white selection tool. Got to use my white selection tool, of course, because this is now a clipping group now that I've clipped the background. And then I need to find a little bit of black somewhere. I click on the color palette and give it a black stroke. This isn't giving me a chance to widen that stroke, so let's just open the stroke window, and that should give us a chance to not only have a black stroke, but to have maybe like an 8-point black stroke that looks like a serious frame. Okay, so these are some of the ideas and tricks that I use to make my little demo design. You obviously don't need to make your own pattern. There are lots and lots of stripes and checkers and zebra patterns and so forth in Illustrator. Stripes could certainly work, right? A zebra pattern could work, right? You're going to have to convert that to black and white finally, but you get the idea. You can use patterns of any kind and put your word over them. This pattern might be too thick to really render that word legible, but you might consider giving the word a white fill instead of a black fill and see what happens, right? Your words can be the holes as well as the negative shapes. So here I've got a 3.5 by 8-inch template rectangle filled with the 6 words, anything can happen, anything can happen. And I'm here to tell you that that is true. The approach I've taken in this one is to work with the black spaces, in other words, the spaces that will eventually be rendered in plastic, as the negative spaces around the letters, and letting the letters themselves be cut away. So let's see how this works, and let's analyze it for how it will work as a 3-dimensional printed piece. Now obviously the little holes in the middle of letters, those things, if they're printed in plastic, are simply going to fall out, right? So you can't use these shapes, which are called counters. Those will be eliminated. So you'd have to see how your word looks without the counters in it if you're going to use this method. Here, what I've done is I'm going to unpack the layers of this in the layers window. You'll find that this is a really great way to look at your file and to select only the things that you want. Right now you can see that my whole layer, it's a clipping group because I've used the rectangle, the top rectangle, as a clipping group to cut off the edges. Now if I want to affect anything inside that clipping group, for example, if I want to go back and put a stroke on it, I have to use my white selection tool, and I'm going to click away to deselect everything, and then I can simply select the rectangle itself by clicking to the right on the right edge of the box here, and I can give that rectangle, let's give it another 8-point stroke, why not, so that we see it on the edges of the letters. Right? Now if I had tried, whoops, my layers window has gone away. If I had tried to select that rectangle all by itself with the white selection tool, I could easily have ended up selecting some of the type, something like that. So I've given the rectangle a stroke now. You may like that or you may not, but I'm not quite convinced I like the way that the G interacts with that stroked edge now, but that's something that you could do. You can affect the items that are contained within the clipping mask. So for example, I've given a stroke to anything, and I think it makes it look a little too skinny. So I'm going to go in here, let's expand this a little bit so I can see where anything is. There's anything. I have two anythings, but the one I want is this one down here, which just was selected. And as you can see, it's hard for Illustrator to know if you just drag your cursor over the file which set of words you want. This can make things a little bit clearer. So it's got a 3-point stroke. I'm going to take that stroke down to 1 point, and anything gets a little bit bigger then. Anything is apparently, I'm going to move this over so I can see it a little bit better. It's in front of happen, but it's behind this critter here, and I'd like it to be in front so that I see that stroke. So I'm going to simply take anything and drag it up within the clipping mask. And now I can see its stroke on top of the other letters. Let's select away so everything is a little bit clearer. Now obviously this little shape here, this little black shape, would fall out if I were to create this as a three-dimensional object. So you see the problem, especially when working with letters. The counters inside the letters are important for legibility, and it's difficult to connect those to the positive areas around them without using some kind of pattern. Anyway, fun though to see how the layers work, or the objects work rather, within a layer and within a clipping group, and how you can manipulate those things, always remembering to use the white selection tool for any changes you make inside a clipping mask. The other thing that I wanted to show you is how to use one of the Illustrator patterns. So here I filled a template rectangle with an Illustrator pattern, and I'll just show you where I found that. This is sort of zebra pattern, and I found it under under patterns, nature, animal skins. There it is, and I grayscaled it to get rid of a funny little beige background that it had. And I'm just going to show you how it looks like with what it looks like with a word in it. I gave the word time, which I copied from that original file, a white fill and a black stroke in order to connect those white letters to convincingly to the black pattern around it. And of course, you'll see that Illustrator is still thinking of this word as a word that can be altered with a cursor in the word processing method, but having used the envelope distort on it, what we really see in the file, of course, is the black line. So you'll notice, if you're analyzing this carefully, though, that not everything is connected with the edge. This counter here in the middle of the E, called the I of the E, would fall out because those lines are not connected with any of the black lines that touch the edge. This, I wish I could show you this without it all turning blue. This area in here is all connected, but the I of the E is not. Right? So that's a problem. You can get rid of the I of the E and still read this convincingly. But do you want that? That's a design decision that you have to make. So this is a very interesting constraint. Having a pattern in the background will really help, but it won't solve all problems in getting everything connected to the edge. And of course, again, you'd probably want a stronger edge than this just to connect all these pieces. It's fine with me to get rid of these small pieces and let your edge be this fluid, sort of organic shape. I don't require that you keep the exact shape of the rectangle on this edge, but I think if you wanted to do that, you would probably want to fatten this little stroke up so that you have a nice solid edge there. And just as one last thing, one challenge you will have if you're working with a built-in Illustrator pattern rather than one that you've constructed yourself from live Illustrator paths is that you won't be able to find anchor points and Bezier curve handles and so forth to manipulate any of these things. They're basically kind of like pictures. They're not really live Illustrator shapes that you can manipulate, these zebra lines within a pattern like this. So to solve that problem, you can simply select this thing and export as a PNG or a JPEG. A PNG works just fine. Let's call it zebra here so I can find it again. Medium resolution should be fine. And then I'm going to open that file. And now this is actually a picture. And if I select it, I should be able to get Illustrator to do an image trace on it. Yeah, make. Let's do make and expand so that we see all the little anchor points right away. So Illustrator is going to look at this picture and it's going to trace around all those little shapes. We're going to zoom into it here, and I'm going to click on the white selection tool so that you can see all the anchor points. These are now live Illustrator shapes. I want to make sure that these shapes in between here are empty rather than filled with some kind of white fill. So what I'm going to do is take the magic wand, which, as you'll see, selects objects with similar appearance attributes. And I'm going to click in any of these black neighborhoods here and select all those black shapes. I'm going to copy that. I'm hitting Command C on my keyboard, or it will be Control C, or you can go Edit, Copy. And let's just paste this somewhere else in the file here. Command Paste. And now we have a file that has only these black areas. The white areas are empty, and I can treat it just like Illustrator shapes that I had drawn, say, with a pen tool. So you'll want to do that if you need to do things like, say, eliminate these little shapes on the outside here. I can now take these shapes and get rid of them. So I could take this little area here and delete it. Okay? Okay, so that's a little bit about how to use pattern or how to use overlapping letters to try and connect everything to the edges so that nothing falls out. That's one way that you're going to be analyzing the designs that you and your colleague or colleagues bring to the group discussion.